Okay, so this week I have been seeing a lot of things, and it usually kind of happens around Christmas for some reason, which I can't explain, where I'm seeing posts and comments by people who say things like, white chocolate is not chocolate. What is white chocolate? This is white lie. You've been lied to your whole life. So I want to talk a little bit about white chocolate, what it is, where it comes from, and why people say that it's not chocolate. So this is actually, it all comes down to semantics, basically. There are some very important people in the chocolate business who say it is not chocolate. There are other people who say it is chocolate. So it really depends on who you're talking to, how you're looking at it, if you're looking at it as a legal definition or some other way. So here's the reasons why people say it's not chocolate. Number one is that it has no cocoa solids. That's the brown part. And I'll talk about that in a little bit of a minute when I explain where chocolate comes from. Number two, one of the reasons why I think that people say white chocolate isn't chocolate, because most of the time they're not eating white chocolate. They're eating junk. I can't even call it junk chocolate because it's not even chocolate. It's just junk. So this is the stuff that has what's called a CBE or CBR, cocoa butter equivalent fats, cocoa butter fats, other fats, the fat in cocoa butter being replaced by vegetable oils or CBRs, cocoa butter replacements. So things that aren't from the cocoa bean being used to make something that is labeled white chocolate. And the other thing is tricky labels. There's a reason we need to have legal definitions for things, and that's because, number one, marketers are tricky and they understand how your brain works, and sometimes we don't even understand how our own brain works. And we need to understand that in order to understand whether or not we're eating white chocolate or something other than white chocolate. So let's start with a little bit of history. White chocolate is said to have been first made by Nestle in 1936, and it was called Galac. And you can still get this bar some places in the world. This one, I believe, is from South America. And so they're still making white chocolate with that label. In the UK, I think it was called Milky Bar. I don't know if you still have that in the UK. So they said it was originally created to use up excess milk powder and excess cocoa butter. I'm going to come back to that one in a little minute. So you've been seeing white chocolate since 1936, 1948 to 1990. Nestle had something called an Alpine White that was sold quite widespread. It was a white chocolate bar with almonds. In the 1990s, Hershey's began mass producing its Hugs and Kisses bar and Cookies and Cream bar. And they are part of the reason why we have a legal definition of white chocolate in the United States. So, I said it was made to use up excess milk powder. So Peter Nestle invented milk powder. They had a lot of extra for the war, World War I apparently, and also excess cocoa butter. So part of the process of making chocolate in 1828, Van Houten press was invented. It's a hydraulic press that allows you to extract the cocoa butter from the cocoa solids. He had a patent on that until 1838, and then when that ran out, then you start seeing the first, coincidentally, solid chocolate bars being made. The first one in 1847 by Fry's, followed closely after by other chocolate makers. So we've had white chocolate for almost a century now around, or let's say white chocolate or something resembling white chocolate. So I want to do a little bit of a lesson. I want to flip the camera around and show you some stuff, but I'm wondering if there's any other history that I want to talk to you about first. I don't think there is. So I'm going to flip the camera around. We're going to talk about where chocolate comes from, where cocoa butter comes from, and all the other things that go into making regular chocolate and white chocolate. So let's do that. Okay, so where does chocolate come from? Chocolate pods grow on the Theobroma cacao tree in between roughly 20 degrees of the equator. This is a wooden sculpture that I have of a chocolate pod because I live way above 20 degrees beyond the equator, so I can't get chocolate pods very easily. So they can be a variety of color: purple, yellow, red, orange, green. When they're harvested, they have a thick skin. They're kind of football shaped. They do have different shapes depending on the genetics of the tree. Inside, there's normally this mucilaginous pulp which covers the cacao beans. So the cacao beans would be inside here. There's about 40 to 50 beans per pod. And so that's where the beans come from. They come from the pod. So now we have the beans. So when the makers get the beans, they will sort and clean after they've been processed by the farmers or the agency that does that. When they get to the maker, they'll sort them. They will then roast them. Roasting is part of the step that brings out the flavor. Once they've roasted them, then they'll do what's called winnowing, which is taking this skin off. Where's the camera? Skin off of the outside. You don't want this part, the cacao, the shell of the cacao. So this is the seed. If you wanted to grow a new cacao tree, then this was what you'd be growing it from. This seed is roughly half cocoa butter. So about 52 to 57% cocoa butter. Fat naturally stores energy really well. And so it's storing energy for the cocoa embryo until it can pop leaves out and make its own energy. So once they've roasted, they've taken the shell off, then the bean, they crack it and they're left with, the bean cracks apart and you're left with what's called nibs. So here's the cocoa nibs. So they come, once they've winnowed the bean, then you get cocoa nibs. You can eat these nibs. They taste like chocolate. Good nibs will taste better. So the nibs are what the maker puts into a melanger or a grinder. And this still has the 50% cocoa butter to make what's called a chocolate liqueur. All right, from there, the maker can either process it into a bar, or like large manufacturers will do, they will press it. And you will take these nibs made into a liqueur, so they still have the 50% cocoa butter. They'll put it in a press, and what will come out are these two things. You'll get what's called a cocoa press cake, which can then be ground into a powder. You know this is the powder that you cook with. And cocoa butter. This is solid cocoa butter. When it comes out of the press, it will be liquid because pressure and temperature are the same thing. The higher the pressure, the higher the temperature, so it melts. So when it comes out of the press, the cocoa butter will be liquid. Now you can see this isn't white. This is kind of a yellowish kind of color. So not white. So to make a chocolate bar then, what you can do is you can either then use the nibs that you ground up and maybe add some cocoa butter back into it, or you can use the cocoa powder and add sugar and cocoa butter back into it and mix that in your melanger. That's how you get a regular chocolate bar. Now, when we're talking about, well, let me tell you, there's three ways. So there's three kinds of ways to get cocoa butter. There's 3 degrees of cocoa butter. So you can extract it with a pure pressed butter, which is the one that I told you. You press the liqueur, you get out the liquid cocoa butter, and you then often deodorize it. You can or cannot deodorize it. That's the highest quality, just to use a horizontal press. What's left in the press cake, which usually looks like this big puck thing, is 8 to 24% fat left, but that's the highest quality cocoa butter. Then you can get substandard cocoa butter, where instead of shelling the cocoa beans, they press the beans without deshelling them, and the shell contains fats that are not cocoa butter fats, and so that affects the cocoa butter flavor and properties itself. And then you can have solvent extraction. So I said there was some fat left in the cocoa press cake. To get all the fat out of the cocoa press cake, you can use solvents to extract it from the cake, but this cocoa butter can't be used as is. It needs to be further refined. So to make a white chocolate bar, then, these are your ingredients. So then you would have, and usually it's so the ratio can change, but it's kind of similar for many makers. So these are the ingredients that you would have in a white chocolate bar. You'd have cocoa butter, sugar, and milk powder. Okay, what do I want to tell you? So legally, in the United States since 2004, and in the European Union since 2000, a white chocolate bar is defined. It never used to be defined. Dark chocolate is actually not defined either, still, but white chocolate is. So white chocolate must be a minimum of 20% cocoa butter, a minimum of 14% cocoa solids, and a minimum of 3.5% milk fat. In the United States, the sweetener, the sugar, so this is my sugar, this is my cocoa butter, these are my milk powder. So in the United States, there's a maximum sweetener of 55% of the ingredients, and there's a ban on colorants. In the European Union, before it was legally recognized, so before 2000, it would have been called confectionery summer coating. Rolls off the tongue. And you would have had to have had a temporary permit to actually sell white chocolate. So white chocolate, correct, does not have any cocoa solids. Does that make a difference? Yes, it makes it not brown. So these would be our cocoa solids. This is what's missing in here. So this is where your chocolatey, fudgy flavors come from. But you can also get cocoa flavor out of undeodorized cocoa butter. So it will retain some of its cocoa flavor. So no, it doesn't contain cocoa solids, but chocolate, as legally defined, can't be chocolate without containing cocoa butter. So it's kind of a semantic legal thing. It's just a funny thing to me. I'm inclusionary. I think if it's good and it's not harming you, why not include it instead of excluding it? So I'm all for calling white chocolate chocolate. Okay, so I want to show you. I hope that was clear. So recently with craft makers coming up, there has been a lot of good white chocolate coming out. One of the earliest craft chocolate makers was El Rey, from South America. El Rey, their Icoa white chocolate uses undeodorized cocoa butter, and it's beautiful. It's got a lovely white chocolate flavor. I have a bunch of other ones. So you can have straight up white chocolate, but a lot of time people put inclusions in white chocolate because it's this beautiful blank slate canvas. So normally a classic white chocolate will have 30 to 40% cocoa butter, 30 to 40% sugar, and 20 to 30% milk to give you 100% of a bar. So with flavored, you add 5% inclusion, up to 5% inclusion in there. So a lot of makers are doing really fabulous things with white chocolate. This is one of my favorites, the Castronova white chocolate with lemon oil and lemon sea salt. It's beautiful. The mouthfeel on this, she's just got the cocoa butter right. Soma does some lovely stuff with white chocolate bars. So this is, if you look at the ingredients on this bar, it's first ingredient cocoa butter. Same with this one. First ingredient cocoa butter. So you're not making these bars without something that came out of this pod. You cannot make this bar without something that came out of that pod. So this is a lovely raspberry bar. So it's cocoa butter, cane sugar, and raspberry from Soma. They have lots of lovely bars like this. And then you have Map Chocolate. She totally explores flavoring white chocolate. This one is Squirrel Stash. It's a salted caramel white chocolate with nuts. Lovely bar. Again, cocoa butter is the first ingredient, cane sugar. So you can't make this without something that came from the cocoa bean. Cacao Sampaka does lovely roses and strawberries. You have Mission Chocolate. This bar, Romeo and Juliet, is unique to Brazil. Romeo and Juliet is a guava cream cheese kind of dessert pairing. So this one, again, if you look at the ingredients are cocoa butter, sugar, milk powder. So there's nothing, no vegetable oil, no cocoa butter, palm oil, weird things in there. This is one of the more unique ones that I've had. It's Cape Cod bar from Chocolatasm. It has lobster in it, and that sounds like it's going to be disgusting, but it works. It's crazy. So it's a lobster essence lemon sea salt bar, and again, cocoa butter is the first ingredient in it. So chocolate makers are using this blank canvas to make some delicious things, and it's not. So if you go, maybe I'll include some pictures here. If you go to the grocery store and you look at what you believe is white chocolate chips, you'll see that it doesn't say chocolate on it. It says white chips or white flavored or white flavored chocolate covering. It doesn't say white chocolate because legally they're not allowed to say that, but it tricks our brains because our brains like to recognize patterns. It makes the world easier for us to walk about and live in. And so when we say something that says white chips and they look like this, our brain fills in with white chocolate chips. And that's what marketers take advantage of. So when you get something like white confectionery or white flavored, it's not white chocolate. So there is white chocolate that's white chocolate, and there is white chocolate that is not white chocolate. So I would highly encourage you to explore all the lovely white chocolate bars that are coming out now with these interesting inclusions from makers who are really good at finding the balance in the flavors. Okay, so I'll flip this around and we'll talk about a few of the unique properties of cocoa butter and what makes a good white chocolate bar. Okay, so cocoa butter has some really cool properties to it. So the one that I always talk about in my videos, if you're familiar with them, is that they have a melting point which is very close to human body temperature, which makes it so pleasurable in our mouth, which means it's solid in your kitchen, but when you put it in your mouth, it starts to dissolve, and that's what gives us the pleasurable mouthfeel. So it's solid at room temperature. It's normally, when it's solid, it's not white, it's yellow. So it's got a yellow tint to it. If you see white chocolate that's super white, it's probably not white chocolate. It's probably a confectionery coating. It mainly has 3 fatty acids. So it's got palmitic acid, which is a saturated fat and it's not good for heart disease. It's got stearic acid, which is a saturated fat and is neutral as far as heart disease goes. And it's got oleic acid, which is a monounsaturated fat, and that is good at decreasing heart disease. It has, because the cocoa solids have been removed, it has very little polyphenols, which is that stuff that you always hear about that's good for your heart with wine and dark chocolate. Very little theobromine. So sometimes cocoa butter can have, low quality cocoa butter can have an off flavor. It can taste a little bit soapy, which is why they developed a method to deodorize it. But like I said, undeodorized cocoa butter can have a lovely cocoa nuance to it, the flavor that is still there. So how do you know? How do you know you're getting a fine flavor white chocolate cacao bar? First off, most unlikely they're using an undeodorized cocoa butter. It retains some of the cocoa flavor. It resists oxidation longer because vitamin E is dissolved in the fats and that prevents oxidation. Deodorizing just means that they use a high heat steam treatment and then they filter it to make it a neutral fat. It's just basically a fat, then it retains no flavor. But you want some of that, if it's from a good bean, you want some of that flavor left in there. Do I have, where's my Atkinson's bar? Oh, I don't know where it went. Oh, here it is. Oh, I forgot to show these ones. So the Atkinson's bar is a nice one where they use undeodorized cocoa and you still get cocoa butter and you still get the nice cocoa butter flavor in there. I forgot to show these. So this one, the Amade Solstice, does lovely white chocolate, but she only does it seasonally, so Christmas is the time you want to get her white chocolate. And Ashkenazi white chocolate out of Philippines, they make a white chocolate nib bar with goat milk, which is another thing that makers are doing. That brings me to number 2. So number 1 was undeodorized cocoa butter. Number 2 is using different kinds of milks. Oat milk, goat milk, almond milk, any of the vegan milks that you're thinking of. This one uses goat milk and it imparts some flavor to the bar itself. The bar, the white chocolate from Ashkenazi with nibs, brought a lot of people into the fine chocolate world. It's a really good bar. What else? Inclusions. Inclusions make white chocolate bars delicious. They make them amazing, and it's this beautiful blank canvas that these chocolate makers can work with to bring out flavors of other things. And the other one is using quality beans and quality cocoa butter. So you get quality from using quality ingredients. Cocoa butter can be influenced by origin. So South American cocoa butter is the softest. Central American is considered intermediate. Asian, Oceania, cocoa butter is considered the hardest, which harder is better for couverture, softer is better for cosmetics. Let's talk about cosmetics. In the early 2000s, the cosmetic industry discovered cocoa butter, and it went from being almost an industrial waste product. So when Cadbury's and Fry's were first started making that, they had excess cocoa butter left over from making their solid chocolate bars. So late 1800s, it's a industrial byproduct that they're trying to figure out how to use. Today, the cocoa butter is the most valuable part of the bean. The price of cocoa butter has more than doubled since 2017 because it's being used in so many different products now, mostly cosmetics. I'd venture to guess if you went through your bathroom, you'd find at least one product that has cocoa butter in it. So that is what is in a fine flavor white chocolate bar. Don't let anyone tell you that white chocolate is not white chocolate as long as you're eating white chocolate. You have to know what your white chocolate is to make sure that you're getting the good stuff. So I hope that you will go out and try some of these awesome makers and get out there, and don't exclude this from your tasting, because if you do, you're totally missing out. So go on out there and try some stuff and come back and comment and tell me what you tried or what your favorite white chocolate maker is, or your favorite flavored bar. I'd love to hear from you. If you like these videos, make sure to like and subscribe, and you'll get one every week. I hope to see you then. Bye.